Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven and Connecticut tick. Roland Lemar and J.R. Romano make New Haven and Connecticut tick, especially when they're closeted in the same radio studio as they are today at WNHH-FM. J.R. chairs the Republican Party of Connecticut. Roland represents New Haven and Hartford as state representative from the 96th General Assembly District, and he helps Democrats wage campaigns for public office statewide. Welcome to the studio, gentlemen, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Paul.
Year to you, too.
You guys all shared on Facebook here.
That's what I'm trying to do right now.
All right, I'll give you a second to do that. But we're going to talk today about 2018 is going to be a busy year at the state capitol, even though it's a short session, given the continuing budget problems. I feel like that's becoming a default appellation. Like the budget problems at the state capitol. That's sort of the
Sessions are never short anymore.
Well, this one starts in February, right?
This one starts first week of February, but we'll be in a couple times in January as well to satisfy our obligations to make our current budget balanced.
Oh, they are going to have a special session to do that because it's over $200 million deficit.
Yeah, we got $225 million to make up.
Were you surprised about that, JR?
No.
All right. And then it goes through May, is it?
Yeah. First week in May is when we are statutorily defined to end, but again, don't hold your breath.
And then, as we know, it's an even number year, so people are going to be running for state constitutional offices. All the state reps and senators are going to be running against. That's going to be cast upon the year. So how's 2018 looking for your parties, guys, at the Capitol and statewide?
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, you do seem in like a much more relaxed mood than Roland, JR.
I think ultimately, I know from my side, we have so many people, and we do have a lot of candidates vying for particularly the governor's race.
You do? I can't believe how many people are for governor.
Yeah. And they've raised a significant amount of money. I mean, it's not as though these candidates haven't raised. I mean, I think 9 of the 11 or so that are quote-unquote viable have raised $200,000 plus. So I'm just so proud that we have such a diverse group and so many who are willing to put their hat in the ring, put their name on the line.
You mean 10 white people and 1 Indian American?
No, that's actually not true. Oh. Thank you, though. Appreciate the stereotyping. But no, we have a Syrian American, we have an Albanian American, 3 immigrants. We actually just have an Indian American who's announced against Jim Himes. And we potentially could have 2 women. We're waiting to hear from a third woman because Tony Boucher is exploring. But no, we are absolutely thrilled at how many people are willing to try to take on the challenge of stopping the Titanic from sinking. Which, by the way,
also describes the emerging Democratic field this way. Point 2. There's one like Indian American and a bunch of white guys, right?
Look, I mean, the National Party on the Republican side in 2016 had a more diverse set of candidates than the Democratic Party did. And locally, JR is right. The Republican parties put forward a much more diverse set of candidates than we have as a party.
My eyes on George Logan. He's an African American in a very diverse
district. He's awesome.
Who has this Obama way of communicating. He gets along very well with Democrats in his district. He speaks plainly to people. Do you see his someone one day, even this year, on a state ticket?
I think George is still settling in, and he loves what he's doing as a senator representing that district. What I find so fascinating about that district, though, outside of Hamden and I think Woodbridge, the district voted for Trump, so Derby, Ansonia, Naugatuck, Deloro, Blumenthal, and then George. So it was kind of a really interesting.
It's also the whole world, that district. You got Bethany Woodbridge, you got Hamden, you got the
Derby, Ansonia,
right? Yep.
Yeah. So
working
George
class,
is
wealthy.
Yeah. George has done a great job too.
So why now? There's been a lot of talk about how Connecticut turned purple in 2017. That the legislature, even though Democrats technically had the governor's office in both chambers of legislature, when you count the tie-breaking vote in the Senate. In fact, when it came time to try to pass a budget, a bunch of Democrats bolted to the Republican side, and it was a Republican budget that was first passed.
That was vetoed.
Then a Democratic governor then you had to negotiate a bipartisan. Did Connecticut turn purple in 2017? Is it turning red in 2018?
Well, I think the people of this state have been electing more Republicans because they're desperate for a new direction. We've seen consistent out of the Democratic Party. You've seen consistent in terms of tax increases. I think the more devastating thing that no one talks about is I understand the idea of a bipartisan budget, but that CBAC deal, which
and that's the unions that rep the coalition of state unions,
right? They extended it's actually a wealthier package than they give congressmen. They extended that by 10 years, which essentially keeps us in a fiscal crisis.
Now, there's another side to that, right, Roland, which is that for the second time since Governor Lloyd's been governor, there were major concessions given by state
That's
unions.
exactly right. Since 2011, we've entered into 2 multi-billion-dollar saving negotiations with our state unionized workforce. There would be no possibility of a bipartisan budget this past year if it weren't for the billions of dollars that unions gave back that they didn't have to. The
Now, in
idea that
20
you
Well,
had to-
actually, that's not true, Roland. You could have just let the deal expire.
No, because you would have had would have current short-term obligations that are inherent in this budget that recognize savings from that deal, that we would not have been able to recognize the current fiscal year and next year's savings that we need to. Without the savings that you would get from in this fiscal year, next fiscal year, and the next 4 fiscal years, you would not have been able to balance the budget. There would have been no approach. There would have been no bipartisan budget. Like the Yankee Institute and these other think tanks think you could just lay people off. The last time that a Republican governor tried to do that, we ended up settling a multi-$100 million suit because he violated the terms of the CBEC agreement. There was
Right,
no
but the CBEC
option.
agreement was going to expire when?
2022.
Right, and you extended it by 10 years.
We extended it for 5
But
years.
they also started giving people part 401ks rather than, I mean, they had pension reform.
There's small things that are in there, but
billions
fundamentally,
of dollars of savings.
right, but fundamentally what the people of the state need to understand is that you have someone like Dick Blumenthal, right? Senator Blumenthal is one of the wealthiest members in the United States Senate and in Congress, right? He opts out of congressional benefits. Congressional benefits, they are some perceive like, oh, these major perks of being, he opts out because the Connecticut deal is better. So essentially, the deal that you extended is better than what we give congressmen.
So basically, you guys
That's not true.
are arguing
That
about
he
this.
opts out. That is 100% true. He
The
opts-
old Tier 1 benefit deal of which Attorney General Blumenthal was a part of, and now Senator Blumenthal is allowed to remain in, we cannot change the terms of that Tier 1 deal. What we've done in the current deal is actually we've gone from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to Tier 2A to Tier 3 to Tier 4. We've made remarkable changes in the construct of those contracts, and so that you'll never see a situation like that again. You'll never see the multi-billion-dollar savings. In fact, the vast majority of our workforce is on a sustainable pension plan. It is our long-term employees who've been there for 20, 30, 40 years who we never saved for, and a series of Republican and Democratic legislators and governors failed to fund properly for the better part of 25 years. This is
There was
an
a
only
great
problem.
story about that bipartisan problem in the Mirror by Keith Faniff yesterday, where he was talking about how in 2014, when it was election year, he kind of thought it was a conspiracy between Republican Jody Rell and the Democrats in the legislature not to borrow money, not just to close a deficit, but to pay the first year on the borrowing. And kick that down the
we're
road.
held hostage. I mean that's and
And
I
that's
think
not a Democrat or Republican thing. I think we can agree.
well, but I
that
think
was politicians.
I think oftentimes politicians in particular are more focused on the next election necessarily than solving a problem, and I think that the people of Connecticut are getting tired of that.
So how's
because-
that going to play this year, JR? So this year you can be running, and the Republicans did step up to the plate and craft a bipartisan budget last term rather than just say you got to have to own it, Democrats, and you'll have some terrible result, and everybody will be mad at you either way because you're not going to raise money enough and you're going to have to cut stuff. But they're going to have an incentive this year to have the Democrats own the problems rather than make long-term fixes so that they can get elected in the majority, correct? Because you already have a $220 million deficit opening in the new budget, which already was made deep cuts in social service programs in order to even get to what they thought was a balanced budget. So to be responsible this year, you're going to have to make tough decisions to get people mad. Are the Republicans going to sit it out so that they can get elected?
Well, I think, once again, Republicans have been elected to change the culture in Hartford. And I think, again, we talk about some of the things that have happened at the state level, particularly how we've spent our money and what we spend our money on. This is what we were sent to Hartford to do, and I think every Republican is taking that very seriously. And we're proud of the reforms that we're trying to make. We are.
So, Roland, key members of your party joined the Republicans this year in arguing that we can't raise revenues anymore to fix problems. They said that if we raise income taxes, something you've argued doing the wealthy on incomes over $500,000 or $1 million, and raise it to another 0.5 percentage point a year, I guess to 7.5. They argued, the Republicans and some leading Democrats, that if you raise income tax rates any higher, people are going to leave the state. You end up gathering less money, and the reason we keep having these big deficits is the income tax revenues are so unpredictable. But then there's another part of the party, including people who want to primary those who aren't agreeing and who are voting with Republicans.
You can say Representative Josh Elliott. It's okay.
Yeah, okay. And also the whole kind of Bernie Sanders supporters saying that in fact it's very important to get more money out of the wealthy, that it's a lie that you're going to lose money overall, and that you're going to be causing a lot of pain, not necessarily. Your party's kind of ditching you on this, aren't you? Because you've been a revenue growing proponent.
Look, I mean, I think it's true that the Democratic Party in Connecticut is a much more moderate, suburban-based party than I would define. And I think we lack a clear, concise message about how to grow Connecticut in the 21st century, how to make smart strategic investments in our cities and in transportation and our education system to compete in the 21st century. And we don't define this in the proper terms. Yes, we need additional revenues to invest in the things that will make Connecticut strong.
Or we'll keep having companies move out because they say there isn't the infrastructure of the workforce. So what do you think about that, JR?
Well, I think the fundamental problem is that no company is going to expand here. They're not, unless you're giving them corporate welfare, right? Unless you pay, it's like paying to be married.
First 5, yeah.
Right, we're paying them to marry us, right? And then, of course, what happens there is as soon as a better deal comes along, they're gone, right? I think we need massive changing in how we operate as a state in terms of how we look at revenue collection, how we tax. I mean, look, one of the things, and this
but what about the point we were talking about? So you're saying, what about Roland said about investments and not in corporate welfare and giving companies loans to not move even if they weren't saying they're gonna move? But what about in roads and bridges? What about in schools? What about in mass transit?
But the idea is
in community
how
colleges?
you raise revenue, you can expand the tax base, right? You can, by creating a better tax environment, you can get businesses to open, you can get revenue through those processes. I'll give you a prime example. My office was in Hartford, right? I moved it. Why? Because I refused to pay the property taxes that associated with being in Hartford. It didn't make any sense. And frankly, if you continue to have high taxes, your smaller businesses are not going to be able to survive. So you're going to end up giving corporate welfare away.
Property tax so high in Hartford because the conservatives in both parties are not funding cities in the payment in lieu of taxes program.
Many have argued this. Unfortunately, it just doesn't hold true because from my perspective is there are very similar cities that are close to Hartford in terms of the pilot program. Take New Britain, for example. New Britain, 49% of that property is untaxable.
Really? 49%?
It's 49%. They have universities, they have hospitals, they have a ton of nonprofits. Yet somehow, Aaron Stewart, a Republican, managed to save New Britain from almost a $30 million budget deficit, and somehow Luke Broning couldn't. And I know we've talked a little off record about Luke.
That's the Democratic mayor of Harvard.
He's the mayor of Harvard, and he needed massive bailouts from the states. And by the way, when they're unwilling to make massive infrastructure reform and the number of employees they have, and sure, they've laid some people off, but it's not enough.
So
it's not enough.
What do you think about the New Britain example? So I think what JR is saying, Roland Lemar, is that what we've been saying in cities for decades is wrong, that even though more than half our property is taxed up New Haven, he's saying somehow there's some secret sauce that the Republican mayor of New Britain's found that we don't need to be reimbursed for state tax exemptions. We can find other ways to balance our budget.
The mayor of New Britain, who I've met with Ms. Stewart numerous times, chair of the Planning Development Committee, so we interact with first selectmen and mayors all of the time. She's used a series of short-term gimmicks. She's sold one-time revenues, refinancing debt.
JR, tell me that's not true.
Refinancing long-term debts.
That is the lowest form of political expediency, selling one-time revenues to balance a budget. We used to do that in New Haven.
Well, when you have one-off in terms of it just depends on what the budget situation. They told her you're going to have to file. When she first got elected, they told her you're going to have to file bankruptcy, and she refused. And what did Luke Bronin do? He went to the Capitol and said, give me money or I'm filing for bankruptcy. It is an entirely different approach. And I understand, yes, you look at these things and look, you want to talk about budget gimmicks.
She hasn't found a long-term answer to do about tax and property.
Right, but she's growing New Britain, meaning in how she's negotiated, she got a short-term solution. And now she's brought in business, she's brought in redevelopment, and she didn't have to do it.
Has their grand list grown?
Yes.
Because in New Haven, our grand list has grown quite a bit.
Well, but New Haven, let's be honest, benefits from Yale being here, right?
And you also have Yale taking all that property off the rolls.
Right, but you have the benefit of having Yale is the number of people here, number of people who are here, right? So the point is that it's utilizing what you have in front of you properly, and Hartford doesn't do it properly.
Okay, but we're ignoring reality and why cities are taxed their residents the way that they have. We have 169 small communities in the state, which is absurd. In any other place in the country, Guilford, Brantford, East Haven, Hamden, North Haven, they'd all be just New Haven. Similarly with Hartford, West Hartford, Simsbury, Farmington, that would all just be Hartford. And you'd have a shared tax base from which to grow and responsibly invest. Instead, we have these micropolitans that we never fully invest in, that are over 50% tax exempt, that suburban legislators determine what you can and can't tax inside the city of Hartford, make a commitment to fund in payment in lieu of taxes. We understand that you're taking on the brunt of services for the entire region, so we'll give you 77 cents on a dollar for the land that we take off the tax rolls, but then never actually fulfill that obligation.
So I'm going to ask you a question. Did you vote to limit car taxes?
But
So I'll give you a prime example. The state of Connecticut, the legislature voted, forced municipalities to say that you cannot, I think it's 43 mils, essentially, for a car. So you restricted the amount of revenue a municipality could collect, right?
I voted against the budget,
well, but that wasn't in the budget. That was I think that was a separate vote.
No, it was part of the budget. But like there's a.
But the point is that there was a vote. The Democrats pushed this idea that New Haven, Bridgeport, New Britain could no longer basically charge what they could, and for some municipalities it created a massive budget shortfall.
I voted for the plan that actually reimbursed those communities for every dollar that they lost. I did not vote for the plan that unilaterally changed the mill rate at the last second and then did not reimburse those
Which
communities.
is the one that passed.
Yes.
Right. So with all due respect, I understand what you're saying, but you can't have it both ways. You can't force a municipality.
I'm pretty sure I outlined why I don't think I should have it both ways and actually held to my guns. And
But you want county government. You essentially want another government entity to kind of oversee how we're spending money within cities.
I think it's absurd that the state of Connecticut has 154 school superintendents. I think it's absurd that we have 129 police chiefs. I think it's absurd that we have 100 and X number of reading instructors and science instructors.
That would seem to be like a Republican idea. You consolidate, you spend less on public services.
Well, it depends on how you're looking at it. Sure, there's lots of districts that consolidate and use, for example, in the Valley, they do shared services, but there's no taxing authority, right? So what my concern is within county government is that you have a local tax in New Haven, then you have a county tax, and then you have county employees, and you have county pensions, and then all of a sudden now these county governments are behaving as like the city of New Haven.
I've never heard
New Haven is much better run than, say, Hartford, but for example, Hartford has been mismanaged for 25 years.
I've never heard anyone articulate developing a new county-based structure. Instead, I think we need to recognize that it's no longer reasonable or rational to continue to have so many micro communities with their own taxing structure. This would not happen in any other state in the country. They'd recognize consolidations of services in a way that you could have, instead of having all these, every town has their own town engineer and town attorney and town this and town that. And if we had this on a more regional basis and shared those services strategically, you would save, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars collectively across the state. I mean, the idea that we need 119 911 call centers when the city of New York operates one with a greater population and significantly more challenges than we do as a state.
Right. I understand the idea of shared services, but again, you specifically mentioned taxing authority of these entities, right? No,
I suggested that in any other state in the country, you'd have a shared services.
There are cities that already do shared services,
and they have in each community
you guys
has
might agree, because I don't think Roland's saying establish a county government. He's talking about
I specifically, but he hasn't answered the question.
That has more
does this entity that you're talking about, does that have taxing authority?
At the end of the day, going from 12 communities down to 2, those 2 communities will need taxing authority. Yes.
So would you? So I guess from my perspective is, again, we're adding another layer of taxes when we're already the most taxed state in the country.
To those 12 towns, did they become 2 towns instead of 12? So you have less of a taxing authority, or is it going to be?
And what happens to what happens to the municipal pensions? What happened to the municipal employees? What happens to all of that?
We've already laid the groundwork for a lot of this by having a municipal employee retirement system that's administered by the state.
Not everyone's in it.
Not everyone is in it, but we should try to move people more in that direction. At the end of the day, the idea that every town has to have their own dog catcher or town attorney.
Well, and you keep saying that some of them already have shared services.
Yeah, like 9. You know
there's more than 9.
But the reality is we're operating with such complete.
But I think where I'm not figuring out where you guys agree or disagree is, I think if you're agreeing to have more shared services, are you talking about creating new layers of government, or are you just have existing layers of government that have their own taxing authority, share services?
I think it's existing layers of government that remove the need for each individual community to have their own XYZ, and instead have that resource available to all communities, where each community pays for that resource. But, they don't have to have it in duplicate, right? Like the idea that there's a superintendent of schools every 15 feet in Connecticut.
Yeah, why should there be a superintendent of schools every 15 feet?
Well, I believe in local control, right? I believe that someone in the superintendent of Branford would know better what's happening in Branford and the needs of Branford students than, say, Madison. Right, the needs of the people in Madison or New Haven would be very different.
Is it really that different, Guilford and Madison?
No, but I'm using that as a hypothetical, right?
I think JR's indicated that he wants a layer of government that we can no longer support.
Well, no. Actually, the only people that can't support
why do you want
this
all
is
these
cities.
public servants getting paid by taxpayers that benefits they don't need? Why don't we just have one superintendent?
Again,
for
when
all
we're talking about education, we're talking about the quality of education for students. And whenever you add more layers of government and bureaucrats, it doesn't get better for the students.
But he's talking about less of a layer.
No, he's not. That's the thing.
I am. I think there should be one
Or
superintendent.
maybe JR, maybe is what you're worried about is going to create a new layer rather than eliminate
Right,
a
so you
layer.
have one superintendent of schools that is overseeing, 50 schools?
No, he's talking about like 6, right?
I'm talking about like 6 school districts.
They're talking about like
Right,
Hamden
so-
and North Haven.
So,
that kind of
so
thing.
again, and this is the fundamental problem. We're having this discussion because larger municipalities like Hartford are failing.
No,
and
wait,
what it's basically, because the communities around Hartford are not failing.
Why, JR? Why are they not failing? It's because for generations.
Could it be because Democrats have been in charge for 35 years and have really mismanaged the
No,
government,
it's because-
bonded, gave really good
I
pension
appreciate
benefits
that's
to
a
their
simple
employees?
answer that you're a smarter guy than
So how many employees does Hartford have?
I have
how
no
many
idea
ki-
how many
don't
We
you
only
employees
have
at
about
the
5,000 in New Haven. I know that.
Yeah, but, in New Haven, again, we've talked about, I
We've
think New
cut
Haven
government a lot in New Haven.
New Haven is run much better than Hartford has been.
That's Democrats, too, for the last 900 years.
Sure. But I'm just trying to use this example. We're talking about this specifically because Hartford is failing. Right, we're talking about this because Hartford needs to get bailed out. You have other municipalities that
Hartford
are not.
doesn't need to get bailed out. Hartford just needs to be given the resources they've been promised and fail to
so
deliver
they have
for generations.
how much money does Hartford get from the state of Connecticut every year? Do you know?
About $250 million, roughly.
They get more than that for ECS.
No, I think they get 200 and
They get more than that for ECS.
212, I think, for an ECS.
What else do they get?
They get pilot funds. They get a series of other.
How much money?
missionaries. I think it's
$500 million?
I don't know if it's. I don't think it's that high.
Right. So but again, you're arguing is as though the state isn't already giving them much more money than the surrounding communities.
But the state also doesn't let them tax their property.
But again, I'm going to argue, and this
That
is
New Britain
exactly,
sold a bunch
there
of
are other
outside
communities that
buildings.
have similar amount that aren't allowed to tax their and again, the capital, which again is something that is untaxed.
I think New
brings
Britain's mill
how
rate
many
is one of the
people-
highest in the state. You keep using it as an example. I'm pretty sure New Britain's mill rate is one of the highest in the state. It's higher than New Haven's, for example. I think it's higher on residents than Hartford is.
Right, but they
actually.
don't get. My point being is that they're not in the financial straits that Hartford's in.
Oh, they assuredly are.
They're not. Well, this is the thing. I'm talking to you in regards. We can look up the statistics.
But
It's
New
just-
Britain hasn't asked for a bailout of $40 million.
That's
Correct.
true. That is
Right. So I understand what you're saying, but at the end of the day, we're talking about this because Hartford's failing, and it's always excuses. They never look internally as the pension deals they cut. They never look at the number of employees they have. You go on right now and you look at, instead of saying we need to maybe reduce our property tax so we can bring businesses here to feed off the number of students or the number of people that go to the Capitol every day, they're not doing that. They're driving businesses out because of the tax rate, and their solution is, well, let's get West Hartford to pay. Let's get Simsbury to pay. Let's get Glastonbury to pay, when they haven't even managed their own finances properly. So until someone can go in there, you know what? How about this? If we were to do a county government, no one from New Haven or Hartford or anyone would be on the board to make any of the decisions.
Look, for generations, these surrounding communities of every urban area have told, well, let's just make the cities pay. That's exactly what the citizens of your
You just
town
said that
and-
Hartford gets close to $500 million a
Yes,
year.
because they made the trade. Every community made the trade. We'll give those cities money. We don't want any of the problems.
So when Connecticut became in its fiscal crisis, because again, after 8 years of tax increases and failure, we were looking at cutting teachers, right? You were massively cutting education funding. So I think what I find fascinating is here you have the inner cities were well funded. They were not getting cuts, but the surrounding suburbs were getting massive cuts. Seymour, Connecticut, for example, was going to lose $8 million. $8 million. They would have had to lay off about 15 teachers. Now, you're going to tell me that they're not paying their fair share into New Haven's ECS formula to protect teachers here? When they're going to be
I am
laying
going to
off.
tell you that.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you that you listen to Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM. Your home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live stream at newhaven.org. And boy, we're rolling today. We got
I hope someone from Seymour is watching this and saying that Roland thinks it's okay to lay off teachers in Seymour as long as we're protecting New Haven. I get it.
JR, that's not what he said.
Well, no, but
You're
it is what
saying
happened.
you're
It's what
saying
happened in the
that's
budget.
logical conclusion based out of his position.
Right, because what happened is that the idea is we need to protect the cities, but meanwhile, other communities outside the cities are also suffering that do not nearly get the
But
attention
the
that New
counter
Haven does.
argument is that they had more money to begin with because they don't have this high a mill rate because so much of their property is on the tax rolls.
Right, but again, they don't get nearly as much reimbursement from the state of Connecticut in terms of ECS, in terms of any of that other.
We are.
So,
Let's be
And
clear.
meanwhile, Seth Poole writes in, "Good morning, gentlemen." Kate Rosen writes, "JR, come on." Not sure what.
Seth actually and I went to college together.
Oh yeah,
Great
Okay.
guy.
And Kate and
I think Seth is great too.
All right, and so who's going to be great on the ticket this year? Who do you see emerging? You know, so many people are running for governor, and they really represent different ideas about where the party should go. And one of the big debates, and I talked to JR about this recently, and he said I should think of this in a new way. Traditionally, we've always thought that like the bases of each party try to pull the candidates to the extremes in the primary process. So, you know, Republicans to the right, Democrats to the left, and then you have a candidate who isn't as able to run in the general election. And that idea has been challenged. You know, for instance, the Bernie Sanders people said, in fact, that's why they put Clinton up and she got fewer votes than Bernie would have gotten. But, JR, when I talk to you about whether there's a danger, whether Trump politics would excite part of your base but drive other people away in the general election, you said you feel that the party's already acting like a big tent and that they're all part
ours
of it.
is. Yes. Ours is. We don't have a litmus test to be a part of the Republican
Well,
Party.
can you be pro-choice and be the candidate for the Republican Party?
Sure. Sure. There's no litmus test.
When's the last? So you think it's possible you'll have a governor candidate
Well,
who's pro-choice this year?
let me ask you a different question. When and frankly, it never came up. I don't know where Jody Rell stood on the issue, right? But I will tell you that when it comes to the Republican Party, what I love is the fact that we have, and every one of our gubernatorial candidates is very different in that regard. So, you know, it's the big tent party. We have people who are pro-life. We have people who are pro-choice. We have people who, and frankly, I think what's happening in our state, there's more people concerned about the fact that we lost 3,000 jobs in November.
So you think it's going to be the economy? Just
Yeah,
like
I mean,
the
the state, the rest of the country now is booming, right? Not Connecticut.
So, Roland, could a pro-life candidate be the governor candidate for the Democrats?
No.
So do you have more of a litmus test than JR does?
You know what? If it's about pro-life, pro-choice, I am comfortable with there being a litmus test to be the Democratic nominee for governor of Connecticut.
Right.
Yes.
But you don't want that litmus test in the Republican Party.
Well, I think you end up in. There's no diverse thought, right? There's no
So would Republicans
discussion.
be allowed to have a candidate who says we should raise revenues, we should increase taxes on the wealthy? Could you have someone who runs on that?
Well, frankly, I think the problem is that if we're going to be talking about economics, we know that hasn't worked, right? So no candidate would say that because it's failed here under the
some
Democrats.
of the Democrats candidates say and others don't.
Right, because that's my point is that
So they have the bigger tent on that issue.
No, we're just looking at the data, right? We're analyzing what's in front of us.
So
right?
now one point, Roland, is so many people want to run for governor as Republican. People, as JR said, have actually raised some money and raised profile. A lot of them have come onto the show. I found it very interesting to meet them. And not too many Democrats seem as eager. Is that because it's looking like a Republican year even though, but you know what, JR, there's so few registered Republicans, only 400,000 something registered Republicans in the state.
I think each party has some interesting
700,000
advantages.
Some Democrats, 800,000 some independents. So I guess we're really talking about the independents. I mean, basically, are the Republicans onto something that the independents are all going their way this year?
I think each party has some interesting advantages and disadvantages heading into this cycle. Like, I think we could both reverse roles here and tell you how the other party is absolutely not going to win next year because we know what the advantages and disadvantages are. As Democrats, our Tier A candidates have all opted to not run.
Right, whereas the Republicans are like jostling each other out of the way trying to run.
Thankfully, their candidates aren't the most robust bunch of people either, so that's an advantage that is neutralized. When Lieutenant Governor Wyman drops out, when Senator Kennedy drops out, when Comptroller Lembo drops out, like the people we presumed might be our nominee this year are not there. So we're
it
going
seems like
to
the leading candidates are Luke Bronin, the mayor of Hartford, and Joe Ganim, the mayor of Bridgeport, correct?
Dan Drew has raised a decent amount of money out of Middletown.
It's all gone.
Um,
Got to start over. He's back at zero, just for the record. And he's currently being investigated by his own Democrat town council.
You're talking about because of the money he raised from city employees for his
Yeah,
governor
they
campaign?
I think he voted it
mistake.
last night. I think they voted to investigate some of his workings as a mayor.
Now,
So.
is he the only candidate really on the left right now in the Democratic Party? I mean, you got Dita, who's the centrist candidate. You got Bronin and Ganim, who are kind of non-ideological there.
Yeah, it's really too early to tell. For the most part, I've spoken with almost all of the people who are running for statewide office, and all of them right now are in a more of a listening stage than a concrete
But
policy
they got to
proposal.
step up pretty quick. Like if Susan Bice was going to run, I can't imagine she can win this month end.
Well, with campaign finance reform, you actually don't need to be out there that early. You need to have a strong network.
Which she does.
A person like Bice can jump in tomorrow and probably quickly raise the money to compete.
And JR, you're not allowed to say who you would like to see, right? Because you have to be the referee.
Correct.
The fair.
Yes,
But you're
correct.
close to Tim Herbst, the first selectman of Trumbull, who was basically the Trump candidate in the mix, right? He's kind of the right wing.
Well, no, I mean that term
Hyperbolic
Trump
guy.
candidate. Well, first of all, Tim has been a first selectman of Trumbull for many years. He turned that town around when he took over. There was like a big deficit. The credit rating was downgraded. Trump never ran before, right? So you can't, a lot of liberals, a lot of Democrats are like, that's the Trump candidate. They're all Trump, 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 Trump.
But it works the other way, too. Trump got a lot of votes from Democratic voters, especially in the Valley. I mean, that's...
Right, but I
you're gonna
think
be
at the end of the
mining
day, what we need to remind people is that Connecticut is suffering, and all of my candidates are talking about solutions to end the suffering, right? To bring jobs back, to make Connecticut more viable, to make Connecticcut more vibrant. Right now, we're an outbound state.
You'd like to see the conversation not be about Trump, but about Connecticut's
Well,
economy.
listen, I think what it boils down to is that...
I meant as an honest question.
No. I think what it boils down to is that what people in this state need to recognize is that this state needs to go in a different direction, and the only people talking about a different direction is the Republican candidate.
So, Roland...
JR's right there. I got to be honest with you. Like, the Republican Party wants to ensure that this election is not about Trump. We kind of need to make sure it's not about Malloy as Democrats.
That's what I was about to say. I was seeing right up to the Republicans. Everyone would be saying Malloy the whole campaign. If it's up to Democrats,
Malloy's on
they're
the
gonna
ballot.
They're
Look,
going to say Trump, and all the Democrats would like to say Trump.
I guarantee you almost every piece of lit he throws out has Malloy's name on it. And this is the reason why. And it's smart to do it. Kind of unfairly, he is the most unpopular governor in the country.
He's more unpopular than Donald Trump in the state, actually.
And
He is.
And so we have to have a candidate who can articulate a clear vision for how we move forward. We don't have that yet. I mean, JR is right. Right now, starting today, election held a month from now, the Democratic brand in Connecticut is suffering to the point that our natural advantage that we should have in a midterm election with a Republican president, with Democratic, ranks of voters far outnumbering Republicans, we've lost that advantage. All the natural advantages that we should have, we don't have right now because our brand has suffered and we don't have a clear candidate who can articulate where we need to be.
Should that candidate separate himself from Malloy or, in fact, embrace some of Malloy's positions on immigration? I mean, he's been sort of an anti-Trump figure in the state.
I think you need to embrace a lot of those positions, but point to 2022 in a meaningful way. Talk about where we're going as a state. Show us how we get there. Be strong and clear on progressive values. I think that's what I want out of a candidate, but show us the pathway to get where we need to be. Because absent that, the Republicans are going to win the messaging war.
And you're not seeing a candidate yet in the Democratic
yet.
side. Whom would you like to see emerge?
I don't know. No one has actually portrayed what a Connecticut with that vision looks like. No one has done it.
Drew's tried.
Drew has tried. He has tried.
Yeah, I wonder if Drew's kind of like new to the game, kind of. He made kind of a rookie mistake on that fundraising.
No, I think because no one understands is like 2 years earlier they got a slap on the wrist for doing the same exact thing. So it was, it wasn't.
So, JR, you seem like the most relaxed man in Connecticut right now. It seems like you're feeling, oh, my God, if Luke Bronin runs, I could talk about the bailout. If all I got to say
Failing
is
up, you mean?
Yeah, Dan Malloy is even less popular than Donald Trump in the state. Sounds like you got your election year.
No, I mean, it's never easy. What everyone needs to understand, and I think Roland would agree with this, Donald Trump has done one thing. He's really energized the Democrat base, right? So during in the municipal cycle, any town committee that we worked with, we strongly encourage them to completely reevaluate their turnout models. And this is all inside baseball, but we projected about a 10% uptick in Democrat participation. And for most pays, we were dead on, right? Democrats who don't normally vote in municipal elections came out, and the Republicans' town committees that adjusted were fine. Some that were not historically what I'll say is workers, like Ridgefield, Connecticut, for example, didn't necessarily get out there and do the work, and then they were shocked on Election Day. But there wasn't this quote-unquote groundswell, and there's all these other caveats. Like, for example, in Guilford, Connecticut, there was like a very nasty primary. The Republican Party was wounded going into Election Day.
So you're not worried that the frustration over Trump, the way some people claimed in Virginia and Alabama, though those were very specific elections for other
correct.
reasons.
And I think Roland would agree. Every election is a little different.
People felt that the Democrats were spinning the last municipal elections, this anti-Trump movement is growing, it's going to help us next year. Republicans
it's
are
exciting
saying-
their base. I'm not. That's the thing. So my job is to make Republicans understand that there is an excited base, but it doesn't appear that there's this massive punishment, right? So if someone is screaming from the hilltops about Donald Trump, they probably never were with us. There could be examples
So
here
you're
and there.
saying that what Roland's saying is that the danger for Democrats, they have a candidate who's articulating an alternative version to the status quo in the Democratic Party to excite people. You're saying that the challenge for Republicans is to be aware
To match the intensity.
to match the intensity of that base. And do you do it by talking about Malloy rather than Trump?
Well, and look, this is the truth. Republicans romanticize about the founding, right? The founding of our nation, the republic. And so what I challenge them, and I explain that right now we are fighting for the fabric of our state. We're fighting for our survival economically. For many people, they're fighting to stay here, right? Their families are here. They're struggling to afford to live here with the tax rates. And so what I'm saying is we have to be inspired by that story of our founding. That they sacrificed their treasure. They sacrificed their lives in many cases, and it shouldn't be a big deal to sacrifice a Saturday to go door knocking, right? So that's kind of how I talk about it. But it's true. I recognize we as a party have to be as excited and match that intensity. I think Roland probably agree with that.
So you're talking about an excitement gap versus a vision gap. That's what your guys' jobs are going to be this coming year. My job is to remind people that they're listening to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. We got a great group of guests today. We got J.R. Romano, who's the Republican state chairman, and Roland Lemar, who's the state rep from the General 96th District in New Haven and East Haven. And Roland, in what capacity do you work on statewide campaigns?
The last cycle, I was the majority caucus chairman, and I helped manage a lot of the state rep races across Connecticut, helping identify candidates, help training them, help getting them to run against. This cycle, I'll have a more behind-the-scenes role, but I'll still be active in helping to find candidates across the state.
So Kate Rosen writes in, so this is the person who said, come on. Now she's saying, JR, what she meant by come on. With the last session, it is on Facebook, with the last session being dominated by bipartisan divide until the 11th hour, how would a candidate like Mr. Herbst, who enjoys getting in the mud, bring the state together? And then she also said, Republicans door knock, question mark.
Well, yeah, Republicans do door knock. I think Roland would attest to that for many of our legislative successes.
Not in New Haven, they don't, it turns out, but across the state, they are pretty good at it.
We actually can't get Republican candidates to door knock.
That is not true. Jonathan Warren has done a tremendous job. Yeah. I love him.
No, we all love Jonathan Warren. He's trying to get candidates mightily to run. He got one guy who knocked on doors last year out of 30.
So, look, I think at the end of the day, what the people of Connecticut want is a leader. And so I think people forget, Dan Malloy is kind of prickly, right? This was a guy that took on challengers. This was a guy that fought hard and got rough and tumble, and he won. So I think, we're going to see that from a lot of our candidates. People are really upset across the state. People are angry at what's happened here, and they're going to want someone that's going to fix it. And that's how I feel the average voter. Anecdotally, we had a great story of a candidate who literally would go to a door, and she shocked the world by winning. She would go to a door and say, "Look, I just want to introduce myself. I'm running for state rep. I just have one question for you. How do you feel about Dan Malloy?" And these people would go off, right? And
I always thought it was kind of unfair the way people dump on Malloy.
Well, she didn't. She just asked their opinion.
I don't mean the candidate. I mean, I don't quite get his unpopularity.
Tax increases. More and more of our money is going to the state of Connecticut. What are we getting for it? We're not getting better roads. We're not getting a better economy. We're not getting better state service.
My kids hate it when I tell them they got to eat their broccoli.
Well, so Roland, is that you're saying it's an immature populace that isn't looking at hard decisions and wants to have cake and eat it too rather than eat broccoli?
I said yes before you went that far with it.
Yeah.
I think it's not recognizing that we spent 30 years ignoring long-term obligations, failing to invest in our future.
I know Martin Looney really did a bad job at that. Yeah,
and making a series of poor choices. And the governor comes in, and he has got to straighten the ship. And some of the things that we tried to do did not work. They have not solved the problem. I've got to own that. Now being there for 7 years, the governor has to own that. We have got to own that where we are as a state is not where we thought it would be. And we need to have a compelling candidate who can point to a better vision of tomorrow. And if we don't have that, a Democrat who's running against Malloy and running a little bit scared against a Republican who knocks on your door who's got a vision for how to get there, even if that vision is wrong and narrow-minded and old world laugher economics, trickle-down theory, crazy.
So
like
just-
that person's going to win because it at least looks like a future they understand.
So
It's
here's the fundamental
simplistic,
problem.
it doesn't work, but it sounds like something they can get behind.
But Roland, what I would argue is the Democrats have have had control of our economy, let's say, for 7.5 years. And if you want to go back before that, I mean, Jody Rell, the Democrats had a veto-proof majority in the. I mean, they did whatever they wanted in this state economically, whatever they wanted, right? So to argue that somehow a different direction is somehow voodoo when the Democrats have failed in this state, failed. I mean, it's unequivocally failed. We are looking at massive deficits year after year after year. And the fact that Martin Looney challenged GE. He said, we don't need them. He was very arrogant about the whole idea that GE leaving. Well, now it's time to pay the piper because all of those really wealthy people that Democrats have chastised in this state are gone. What no one understands is we have the number of millionaires in our state, in fact, are growing.
So they're not gone.
Well, but wait a minute. What no one talks about is in 2-year span, I think we lost 7 billionaires. 1 billionaire could represent up to $100 million in tax revenue. You need about 2,000 millionaires to match 1 billionaire. So we are not keeping pace. These billionaires are leaving in droves, and that's why we're seeing John Tudor Jones, right? He left. Thomas Pettifee left. That's where we're seeing these massive
So,
budget
Roland,
deficits.
what about the billionaire gap? You worried about that?
See,
You worried that billionaires leaving Connecticut in droves?
I mean, droves. I think we went from like 14 to 12. I think that's the
No,
number.
it's larger than that. But
So you're saying the net, some came in, some came out.
I think some came in with like some grew, some. I mean, I'm not going to get into the reasons why a billionaire
some
decides.
billionaires became 2 billionaires in one.
but
what do you
we're
think
not.
of-
The
but what
revenue
about this
shortfalls
issue?
are there.
The revenue shortfalls are there. No, without question, the revenue shortfalls are there. The amount of dollars that we've predicted on a year-by-year annual growth never materialized.
I don't think Malloy's been right once. Oh wait, no, that's not
To
true.
be fair, it's not Malloy who makes this determination. This is a nonpartisan.
His administration.
No, it's the Office of Fiscal Analysis, which is a nonpartisan agency that has absolutely nothing to do with Governor Malloy.
Actually, one of my and this is
Jared, what
actually
about that?
this is well. If you want to make the argument that it's a nonpartisan, Ben Barnes, fine.
He's OPM. That he definitely works for Governor Malloy. He's definitely a Democrat. The Office of Fiscal Analysis, which has to vet all of our budgets, has vetted all of these budgets in a nonpartisan way. OFA is not OPM. OPM comes up with budgetary proposals and policy proposals, and they have to get voted on, and they have to be vetted by our nonpartisan Office of Fiscal Analysis.
Who hires them?
The Republican and Democrats have
Oh,
to
they get
agree on-
appointed.
Yes.
Okay. So, but here's the thing. What I think really frustrates me is when we talk about these massive shortfalls. 1 year, I think Malloy didn't have a shortfall, and it was because of our inheritance tax. Near the end of the year, we were projected, I think, to have $150 million. I give it. This was like in his first year in office. 2 really wealthy people from Greenwich had died, and their inheritance tax, in fact, closed.
Well, I think the Democrats are acknowledging that we've gone to a much greater reliance on the income tax for revenue. The income tax is more volatile. I think we could disagree about the reasons they go up and down, the variations.
Well, sure, but right now we're an outbound state. We're our population, particularly the wealthy and businesses, are leaving. That is a
But
fact.
We can argue about why. Some people argue it's because we don't invest enough in infrastructure. So when Boston wanted to lure GE, when New York lured Aetna, they had invested, and it takes tax money to do that.
Well, where are we spending our tax money then? Because if this was the case, you're literally sitting here arguing. It's like, well, no, what we're paying for right now, no, we all need that. We just need more money to do this other stuff. And again, I thought gas tax was supposed to pay for infrastructure.
We lowered the gas tax. We don't have tolls. We have
you lowered it, or did you take it away from being a variable?
we took it away from being a variable, which ended up necessarily being a lower gas tax.
Right, but where did all
both
that,
things can be true?
Right, where did all that revenue go? Did the legislature at any point in 7 years that you've been there have they raided that transportation fund to meet operating expenses and use it on something other than infrastructure?
1 year there was a net outflow from the special transportation fund. It was made up for by many more dollars going to transportation on the bonding side, where we bought.
She borrowed.
Well, yeah, we bought a series of train cars. Like, it was hard to come up with the $3 billion to make a strategic investment in mass transit that get us to the largest job center in.
Right, but my point is, you can't say that. Well, we took hard cash out to pay for something, and then we borrowed over here, because that's not.
No. Then there was 1 year when there was a net outflow out of the 7.
Just one.
Yeah, just one.
We're going to see Chris Murphy running for president in 2020. The New York Times puts him on the top list based on Quinnipiac University polls of 10 most likely Democratic contenders.
I've known Senator Murphy since he was just Chris, who was dating a girl down the road here in New Haven, and he is a remarkable potential candidate who is smart, concise, willing to paint that vision of a future that's both progressive, honest, and making tough choices.
So
I think Chris would be an outstanding choice.
I think his ego will lead him down that path. Here's a guy who is the epitome of divisiveness. I find it really ironic and sad that you have someone who has tweeted out that Republicans want people to die, and he's taken seriously. If a Republican had tweeted something out like that he had done,
in fact, Donald Trump tweets stuff every day that you can't believe he tweeted.
Well, but again, so
bigger nuclear buttons today with the
right, but again, Chris Murphy tweeted out that Republicans want people to die, which isn't true. But no one cared, right? Because, of course, he's a liberal, so the media kind of ignored his outrageous statement like that.
Are we going to pretend that death panels and like essentially 5 years of Republican mass media operation didn't do the exact same thing?
Right, so let me ask you, if we want to talk about, are you in Obamacare? Because I am.
I don't think I'm on Obamacare, no.
No, you get insurance through the state of Connecticut, right?
Yes.
Okay, so do you know how much my premium is?
As a single person, what are you, 36 years old?
38,
38
39,
years old,
actually
39
just turned 39 November.
Congratulations. I presume you're, well, it depends on which plan you're on, but you can probably get something between depending on your income, between $180 a month up to maybe $500 a month.
Yeah, I pay a little bit more than $500 a month.
But you're
Yeah.
lucky it's so low because you have like a real job. You work for an organization that gives you salary and you're paying that little.
No, so I work for a small nonprofit that is forced to go into the exchanges, and Obamacare is anything but affordable.
That's the Connecticut Republican Party?
Correct. So this is my fundamental problem. For me to look at and say, how much do you pay for your health insurance?
Well, I have a family plan. I think I'm paying maybe $300 a month.
I should be okay with paying an additional $200 for a liberal ideological plan that isn't working.
So why
and
do you
question
why
it,
is the
and then be told that I want people
Why
to
in the
die.
world is
That's
the-
okay.
is the
Because that's what Murphy did, right? I'm paying
wait.
$500 a month, $200 more a month than you are.
This is a wonderful construction to get away from the point that.
No, it's not a point. I have to. It's out of my pocket.
I'm just
Roland.
trying to
It's out of
figure
my. It's not out of yours. It's out of mine.
Why is the Connecticut Republican Party on Obamacare?
You're a small business. You have to be. You have to go to the exchanges under the rules. That's the fundamental problem. I pay $500 a month.
Why don't you go to a private insurer?
You
love the private market.
You don't understand. That's how it works. I have an insurance broker, but it's you have to
go.
go.
We're a nonprofit. We're small. We go to United Healthcare.
It's
costs a lot more.
It's all through the exchanges. The point is that I'm paying for an ideological idea on universal health care or whatever the Democrats want to do. I pay $200 more a month than you do. How is that fair? And you're insuring a family, right?
Yeah.
So for me to be against something like that, I want people to die because I don't think it's fair that I'm paying more money than other people.
The construct with which you've developed this argument is great. It's smart. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant way to do it.
And it's true.
The reality is people will be pushed off of insurance. People will be denied coverage. There will be people who die. This is, again, nonpartisan analysts
So you're talking about the pre-existing condition
Yes.
caveat, which I'm in favor of. Next
You
step.
are.
Yes. Now what? So most Republicans are in favor of the pre-existing condition. You're not answering my fundamental question. For me to be against the idea that I should have to pay $200 more a
if
month.
there is not an individual mandate. The whole thing fails if there's not enough money in the system to provide coverage
You're not fundamentally answering my question. Why should I have to pay $200 more a month than you when you're covering a
But
family?
he's not a good example. You're paying so much less than we are at the independent. We're a nonprofit. We're
Well,
United Healthcare.
how
Obamacare is so much less than the private market.
Right, but again,
They're killing us. We went up 22% this year. Because my wife and I, it cost
so you should
almost
agree with me.
$30,000.
You should agree. Well, it also depends on your age and all the other restrictions in the
rural,
government. So,
yeah.
right. So, look, at the end of the day, for me to be against something that's costing me real dollars, Roland, real dollars, $200 more a month that I could
But
pay
you're
towards
still
my
getting-
student
but you're
loan,
still getting it
I could
cheap,
save to buy
JR.
car.
You're getting $500 a month.
Not
That's cheap.
Right.
You're
But
taking the ridiculous legislative plans. That's not the comparison. The
okay.
Republicans
So
in
let's take
Washington have that low insurance too.
let's see. Does anyone work at Yale New Haven Hospital? How much do they pay a month in insurance? I bet you it's lower than what I pay. So for me to be look, this is what people don't understand
I think
about
he
Obamacare.
wants a single payer system because
I don't want a single payer
recognizing
system. I want a free market system, which we don't have. I
Well,
want government out of it.
the free market system is going to yield you much more expensive healthcare coverage.
No, it's not.
it most assuredly was. That's what we had prior
That's
to
not what we
Obamacare.
had. We had government intervention.
You're pointing out two large systems that are able to negotiate for large groups of people to drive down costs. Like if you point to the state of Connecticut, a Yale New Haven healthcare system, you're talking about large insurance plans that are able to drive down costs because they negotiate for tens of thousands of individuals
Right, so let me
at a
ask you a
time.
question. Let me ask you a question. And this is what I think the fundamental problem with healthcare is, and we don't talk about it in the context of the free market. If you work for Yale New Haven Hospital, right, do you have a say in who your insurer is?
I think you can choose from two plans, but
For the most part, you don't. Right, okay. So I'm the one paying for it, though, right, through my labor or directly through my salary. I'm the consumer, yet I have no say over what my coverage is, what it covers, who the company's with. If I have a problem with the insurance company that is forced down my throat by my employer, I have nowhere to go. We force this idea that, and by the way, corporations get a tax write-off for providing healthcare. That was the whole scam in the first place. Insurance companies didn't want to sell to us on an individual basis. So even though it's my labor, my sweat, my tears, my money, I have no say as the consumer
But then if
of
you
my
don't
own
get
health
adequate
insurance.
health care, or if there's no regulation to protect you against shyster companies that aren't really going to protect you and you need it, you're going to end up at the emergency room, and we are going to pay
I think
for that.
JR is like 5 minutes away from a single-payer universal health care structure.
No.
Well,
Because
we're
nothing the government manages
we're
runs
less
well.
than- unfortunately, we're less than 5 minutes away from the end of the show because I love when you guys are talking. You guys are great. Hey, let me ask you, Oz Griebel's going to run as an independent. How does that, for governor in 2018, how does that throw the balance to the
I think he's going to be a spoiler for somebody.
Who?
Weicker
was the spoiler and Grork for the Democrat, but Oz Griebel doesn't have that kind of statewide recognition.
Well, but in a race that I think is going to be close, if he gets 3 or 4% on either side, he's probably going to be the spoiler. And I think the fundamental problem with Oz is he has zero infrastructure, right? And he's just doing this as a process and ego. And frankly, there's many that theorize it's because he's friends with Luke Bronin and that whole Hartford circle. Yeah, I mean, he's donated to his
That doesn't
campaign.
make sense because he could pull Democratic votes.
I think JR's reached
No,
a conclusion that's going to hurt Republicans more than Democrats. That was a pretty...
The Democrats aren't being critical of him, so...
See, I see it hurting Democrats.
I mean, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
It depends on what his campaign's
And
about.
who are going to be the candidates for governor in the year's over? Who do you think it's going to be?
I have no idea.
No one can... None.
Well, that means you're going to have to come back on Dateline New Haven on WNHS.
It could be
FM.
someone that hasn't even announced yet.
That's right.
All right. Well, I'd like to announce I want to thank you both. J.R. Romano, the state Republican chairman, state rep Roland Lemar. I love when you guys come on Dateline New Haven. You teach me a lot. When you guys are going at it, you both really know what you're talking about, and I love it. Thanks everyone for joining us today.